Hello friends, in this video we are going to learn about Docker. So after this video you will be able to understand what Docker is, why we need Docker and different terminology used in Docker like containers, images, and what is the basic difference between Docker and virtual machine, and last we will see about the Docker architecture. So let's start with why Docker. Before understanding Docker, what Docker is, we need to know what the problem Docker is solving and what is the existing problem in our technology space. So there is a very common problem in our technology space. It's work on my system but not working in the production environment. Okay. So suppose as a developer, I develop one code. So front end is in Angular, backend is in Node, and database in MySQL. So everything works fine in my system. So that's a very happy moment for me. But when I am migrating the same code into the production environment, it is not working. What is the reason behind this? And why we can solve this problem? How we can solve this problem? What is the reason? It is working in my development environment and it is not working in the production environment. There can be different reasons. Like in development environment, we have different operating system in the production environment. So in development environment, we have some Windows 10 or 11 system, but in production environment, we have some Windows 2090 or 2022 server. So that will be one of the reasons. So the underlying operating system is different from the development machine and the production machine. And compatibility with the OS or hardware issue. So there may be n number of reasons why it is working on development but not working in production machine. So this is the general problem and this is the reason why Docker was introduced. Docker will solve such type of problem. So let's start what Docker is. Docker is an open platform for developing, shipping and running applications. It contains all the infrastructure for developing, shipping and running applications. So it is basically a containerization platform that package the application and its dependency together inside a container. We can create the containers or what is the difference, but just understand it is a containerization platform that package all the dependent library and application together. It can work seamlessly with all the environment like its development, production or staging environment. So basically its main role is to separate the application from your infrastructure. So before understanding Docker, first we need to understand what is virtual machine. So this is the architecture of virtual machines. Once we are able to understand the architecture of virtual machine, then we can relate this architecture with the Docker, because architecture of virtual machine and Docker are almost same. Before understanding Docker, we need to understand virtual machine. So you can see here we have some infrastructure here where our real hardware components exist like memory, CPU, hard disk, all that. This is the infrastructure part. Then we have some host OS who is managing this infrastructure. And this is hypervisor. So what is hypervisor? Hypervisor is a special type of software that is managing these all systems. So, and on top of that we have some guest operating system, build library and application. So here you can see we have deployed 3 different type of guest operating system, and on top of that we have build library and applications. So let's understand. So this is infrastructure and this is host OS. So host OS can be any operating system like Windows, Linux, Mac, and this guest operating system can be different. So suppose this is our Linux operating system, then guest operating system can be Macintosh or Linux or Windows, whatever. So these host operating system and guest operating system are independent of each other. But host operating system must support this hypervisor. So there are different hypervisors for each operating system, basically host operating system. So if you are talking about Macintosh, so we can use HyperKit as a hypervisor. If you are talking about Windows, so we have Hyper-V. If you are talking about Linux, so we have Debian. So hypervisor role is to basically manage these components on top of the host operating system. Okay, so here we have guest operations and we have developed our application here and all the dependent libraries and binary here and the operating system that is required to run this architecture and run this application. So this is a basic overview of virtual machine. Let's go to the Docker architecture. So if you come here, you can see it's almost similar but with minor difference. Let's understand. Again, we have here infrastructure like CPU, RAM. Then on top of that, we have host OS. Here we have Docker engine. Instead of hypervisor, we have here Docker engine. And here on top of Docker engine, we have application and their binary. So you can see on top of Docker engine, it is running 3 applications. So it can be n number of applications depend on the Docker host operating system, their memory region, all the stuffs. So Docker engine basically manage these all. So if you go to the virtual machine, hypervisor is responsible for managing these applications. So we have 3 applications running and on each operating system, and hypervisor is responsible for providing the memory, CPU, hard disk, all the resources from the infrastructure to these one is allocated and managing these all application. So each application is isolated with independent. But if you move to the Docker engine, we don't have any intermediate guest OS here. So Docker engine itself is maintaining the applications in an isolated mode. So Docker engine runs on top of host OS and it manages, but it don't have any guest OS. Let's understand here. So this is our virtual machine architecture and this is our Docker architecture. So you can see here infrastructure by same, host OS is same. Instead of hypervisor, we have Docker engine. So Docker engine is responsible for running all these applications, but they don't have the guest OS. So Docker engine itself is managing those applications. Here guest OS is running managing those applications, but hypervisor is managing those OS, guest OS. And on top of guest OS, we have the applications and their dependent library. But here Docker engine itself is managing the application, their dependent library. We don't have any guest OS here. So what is the basic difference? So this is a guest OS that is missing inside the Docker architecture. So, and what are the major advantages we are getting from here to here? So one thing is like guest OS. So if you talk about this whole architecture, it's content of OS. Guest OS can be Windows, Linux, or Macintosh, any system. So if you guest operating system will have their own memory utilization and disk utilization and CPU utilization. So their size will be big, their booting time will be very slow. But compared to here, size will be small, booting time will be small, deployment will be fast, everything will be faster. So that's why we have developed Docker. We will pack all our applications and dependent library in a container and we'll deploy it on a Docker engine. We will understand what Docker engine in the later video. So here, let's understand what. See, we already have seen the virtual machine. So you can see we have app, bin, and guest storage. So we are saying this is a virtual machine. It's a virtual machine here. So you can see we have created 3 virtual machines. So there can be n number of virtual machines. So virtual and hypervisor is the one who is managing those virtual machines. Hypervisor managing this virtual machine. And now come to the Docker engine. So here same thing. If here we have Docker engine and it is managing containers. What is containers? Container is the application and their dependent library without the guest OS. VM has their guest OS, but container don't have their guest OS. So container, what is container? Container is basically a package that include application and their binary and libraries, and Docker engine manages those containers. Okay, so basically Docker engine is used to manage the containers and hypervisor is used to manage the VMs. So let's understand it. So just now we saw like these are the containers, right? So this is the Docker engine, this is infrastructure, this is the host OS, this is the Docker engine, and these are the containers. So what is a container? So you can say like container is runnable instance of an image. So image we will see later. So you can see like just we have objects, right? Running instance of a class is an object. So you can say running instance of an image is a container. So these are the running instances of an image. So a container abstraction at the app layer that package the code and dependency together. So basically what the container contains applications and their binary and library inside a single package, so that one container is independent of another container and it is run in their own environment. They are very lightweight and they contains lightweight and contain everything needed to run the application. So you do not need to rely on what currently installed on that host. So container contain everything that is required to run this application. So suppose it's contain .NET, Java, SQL Server, MySQL, what all component it contains. What all component that is required to run this application is contained inside a container, and it doesn't. So what all component required to run this container, it's contained inside the container. And of course container can less space because they don't have their guest operating system. So this is container. So you can say container is basically a package, a layer that contains all the application code and their dependent library and binaries, and Docker engine manages these containers. Just now we saw an container is a runnable instance of image. So let's understand what this image is. Docker is read-only template containing a set of instructions for creating container that can run on the Docker platform. What that means. So you can understand image as an class. You can compare image with a class. So class, what is class? Class is a template for creating an object. Similarly, image is a template where we write our code, and container is a runtime. So you can relate image as a class file and container is an object. It is made up of a collection of files that bundle together all the essentials such as installation, application code, and dependency required to configure fully operational container environment. So it's basically Docker image contains all the dependency and application code it contains, and we pack into a file that is called Docker file. So basically we write the instruction which has all the dependency and we pack in inside a file that is Docker file. So let's understand what is Docker file. So Docker file is a plain text file which provides space for creating your Docker. So you can say Docker file is just like if you are talking about .NET, so we can say like it is a CS file where we have all the instructions written, or Java file where we have written all the stuff. Similarly, if you are going to create any image template, so we need to use the Docker file where we will write all our instructions. So it basically a text format file which contains a set of command or instruction. And this command instruction is to create the images, and from images we are creating the containers. So these three are interrelated with all together. So if you can see here, we have a Docker file like CS file or Java file where we are writing our instruction. So once you will build this Docker file, then we have the Docker images. Okay. So similarly, if we are building in CS file, we get the class and image, and once we will run this images, we will get the Docker containers. So this is all about Docker. In the subsequent video, we will learn about how to install Docker and few more Docker terminology. Thank you.